Welcome to the Pink Lady Posse podcast, where women over 50 take a fresh look at living, toss out tired stereotypes, and say a big heck yes to what's next. I'm your host, Sandy Parker, and around here, we challenge limitations, rewrite the story on aging, and reclaim our power, pleasure, and purpose. Why? Our next years are not about a decline. They are our big reveal. Let's go. Hi, I am Sandy Parker Martinez from the Pink Lady Posse podcast, and I'm here with Katherine Autin. And I know Katherine from many different angles, let me just say. And I want to say first, welcome, Katherine.
Thank you.
Now, I don't want to go into all the angles we know each other in, but we met through some communities we have in common: Wise Women Collective, Pink Lady Posse, Celebration Friday. And one thing I've noticed is Katherine is no stranger to transition. Would you say
Oh, yes. I'm
so?
sorry. I'm trying not to burst out laughing.
That's okay. You go right away. So give us like just a perspective on transition as you've come to know it.
Well, okay. I started my very first business when my son was less than 6 months old. And I had been working in the international community. I had very good job. I was working actually for a woman-owned firm and in Washington, D.C. And I decided that I needed to start my own business because I had a miscarriage and I was docked pay when I was supposed not to be docked pay. And this was a woman-owned firm that did not have maternity leave or anything. So I was like, if I'm going to work the rest of my life, I'm going to do something I love, and I love jewelry. So I started a jewelry company. I was 26 years old. I had just had my son less than 6 months ago, and everybody thought I was crazy. But I have to tell you, my husband was completely supportive. He was there for me, changing diapers and doing housework while I did trade shows and gift shows. And I was still working. I worked at the National Academy of Sciences at the time in Washington, D.C., and I sold on my lunch hours. I sold on weekends. I did home parties. I did craft shows, and I built a business. And then we moved to New Orleans, and I opened a jewelry store in the French Quarter. And that's a 7 day a week crazy. I had at that time, 3.5-year-old. And to be honest with you, it got to the point where it was like overwhelming, but also, I don't know if you all know about the oil bust in the 80s, but the oil bust left New Orleans in a situation where companies were closing their stores and leaving their inventory in there and walking away. Houses, $1 million houses, people were walking away from their houses and not paying their mortgage or anything. It was really bad. So I saw that we were hemorrhaging. I closed it, and I started a wholesale jewelry company at that time. That company, I grew it to a 6-figure business by the 2000. And then we moved to Louisville, Kentucky in 1991. These moves were because of my husband's job with the federal government. So I picked up, changed, pivoted, did what I had to do, talk about transitioning, starting businesses in different states, different communities, different tax systems, like inventory tax on jewelry was like phenomenally bad. But anyway, I kept that business going for a very long time. And then my husband was diagnosed with Parkinson's in 2004. When he was diagnosed, I had no healthcare background, and it was very sudden. We knew he'd been having something wrong for a while, but we didn't know what it was. It took over 3 years to actually get the diagnosis. Wow. And he did not have the tremor. They were like, that's why they couldn't diagnose him. They thought he had essential tremor because once in a while he had a little tremor. And they said, well, if something else happens, call us. Well, more and more and more things started happening. So when he was diagnosed, I I had my business going. Things were just booming like crazy. He was working hard in his job at the federal government. And I honestly wasn't sure what to do because I read the writing on the wall and I started learning more about Parkinson's. I knew no one personally that had Parkinson's at that time. 2004, I knew about Michael J. Fox. I knew about Muhammad Ali and some of the other famous people who had actually told us they had Parkinson's. But it made me transition again. And so I took my business, my retail business, mainly wholesale at that time. I was selling to companies all over the world. I had an international jewelry business, six-figure business. And again, I saw the writing on the wall very quickly that things were going to have to change because my husband and I were kind of running the company together. I did hand enameling over sterling silver charms at that time. I had taught myself to do that, but it takes two people to do it. He ran the compressor and I ran the foot piece that controlled the little tiny tube that controlled the enamel, acrylic enamel. I loved what I was doing, but it was something I needed his help for. We were able to do that for a little bit longer, but not much. So transition, pivot, pivot. It really it was very difficult, and I saw more and more how these changes and his progression was happening faster. And it really showed me that doing 24/7, retail wholesale just wasn't work. So I started a consulting firm to help companies, and I was a past NABO, National Association of Women Business owner. I was the president for our chapter in Louisville, and I served on that board for many years. So I was like, okay, I'm going to help women business owners write business plans, marketing plans, design websites, do public relations, all the things I'd learned to do. And so I started a company 3 months after my husband was diagnosed. Yeah. While I was still running my jewelry company. So I had two companies going at the same time, and I just kept pivoting as time went on. And when he was diagnosed, I dove in face first, and I call it face first because I knew nothing, and just reading about it wasn't good. So a nonprofit company here that was Parkinson's education, they asked me to run a support group because my husband was one of the youngest people in the area. And she said, can you run a support group? Sure, I said. What I learned was that's how you learn about a chronic disease because everyone in there had different symptoms. They were at different stages. Some were in wheelchairs, some were using walkers, and others looked like they didn't have Parkinson's, like my husband. So I have been running Parkinson's support groups more than 21 years, also caregiver groups as time went on. I've owned a number of different companies over the years, jewelry based, Parkinson's based, caregiver based. At one point, I was running 3 companies. In 2020, I started my 3rd company. So, yes, I know all about transitions.
So then you had years of caregiving. How many
Yes.
years of caregiving?
I say 21 from the time he was diagnosed, but it was many more years than that, probably 25, because I kept having to pay attention, track what was going on, learn more about what his symptoms were, because they kept telling us it was essential tremor, and it wasn't. It was Parkinson's. I knew something more than what they had said, so I kept digging and digging and digging. But the reality of our lives at that time was Parkinson's overtook everything. But you know what I did? And this is I'm proud of myself because I gave myself permission to still run my businesses, to still design my one-of-a-kind jewelry. So I ran Parkinson Partners, which I started in 2012. And then I created a new company of jewelry called Kat's Jewelry Magic, K-A-T apostrophe S. And that was in 2018. And that was to design one-of-a-kind pieces of jewelry that I could sell and give a portion back to programs for people with Parkinson's and their family caregivers. And it all had to mesh together because I am one of these people who I'm kind of, a lot of us are multi-purpose. I'm multifunctional. So I have my creative side, but I also have this need to help people. It's just like innate in me. I can't help it. Whether it's business or people struggling with difficult health issues, that's who I am. And I wanted to find a way to mesh how I was helping people with Parkinson's with my jewelry designs. And so Cat Story Magic was born from that.
Okay. So we have pivot, 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 diagnosis, caregiving, 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 Parkinson Partners, jewelry. And there came a time when things came to an end
Yes.
and he passed away.
Yes.
And that was last year.
It was in July of 2025. He had Parkinson's 21 years. And then in the meantime, I had to have corneal transplants. So I had to have my eyes done in March and April of 2025. When I got back, he went to the hospital. They diagnosed him with cancer. It was a rare progressive form of his thyroid that had spread into his lungs, and it was filling up very fast.
No.
It killed him in less than 3 months. And I'm thankful he wasn't in a lot of pain. I think the most pain, because at the very end he had pancreatitis.
Mhm.
And I suspect it was from the immunotherapy that he had, Keytruda. I don't know for sure, but I suspect that's what it was that really took him in the end.
So let me just say, I'm just going to inject in here. I'm a widow also. However, when my husband passed away, I didn't do anything for a year. Like, I don't even think I got out of bed for a year. But I know that you have written a book, you have been speaking at occasions, and you would think in the middle of this grief toiled soil that you would do nothing. And yet, I'm in a group with you on Friday morning, and you go, my dreams are coming true. I'm like, what is happening? So, what is happening?
Well, I'll take you back. When my husband passed away, as a caregiver for that many years, for 21 years, I had been grieving on and off all those years,
Yeah, yeah.
grieving the loss of what our future was going to be, of watching him deteriorate, of watching him change, where he was a man standing tall and then he was bent over and then he started falling. So it was like this. I knew that either Parkinson's or something would take him.
Right.
And I allowed myself throughout, and he was supportive of this, but I allowed myself to continue. I became a board certified patient advocate in 2018 so that I could help people on a consultant basis,
Right.
individuals with Parkinson's and their family caregivers. So I continued to work with people virtually, especially during COVID.
Right.
But I also ran support groups, both online and in person, once COVID was over. And I still designed my jewelry. But when I had to have my eye surgery, my corneal transplants last March and April, I had to put myself on sabbatical because I couldn't see to design my jewelry. And I got used to not designing. So I am still on sabbatical with my jewelry company. I mean, I still have a lot of jewelry to sell, but I'm not creating my jewelry. My background is in international studies and cross-cultural training. That's what my degree's in. I speak French and Italian. I've lived overseas. I've worked in the international community. In DC, I worked in there. And then when we moved to Louisville, I worked here periodically. And a lot of what I did was volunteer. But I always had this dream years ago. You have to understand where I came from in Alexandria, Virginia. My father was a famous writer. He was a Pulitzer Prize winner. And he worked for he walked with Martin Luther King and wrote a series of articles about the civil rights movement and from the Washington Evening Star. And so he got this Pulitzer Prize. But my father was someone who loved bringing international folks to my house. So I met people from different parts of the world, and I grew up with the childcraft. So I read all these stories about India and China and Egypt. And so international was in my blood as well. And so when my husband died, previously I'd been on the board of the United Nations Association for the Kentucky division, because I'm in Louisville, Kentucky. Mm-hmm. But I had also been the president of the Louisville United Nations Association, our chapter here. And I had to pull myself off of all the boards I was on because I was 24/7 caregiving the last 7-8 years at least. More than that, probably. And just, I couldn't do it all. I tried, but I had to pull myself off. So when my husband died in July, first of all, the very first thing I did after he passed, I started writing a second book. Yeah, I did that in morning that he passed. I started writing it in French because my husband was Cajun French and we used to speak French a lot. And so I started writing it out and I said, Mon amour David, je t'aime. And then I went on, I was like, wait, nobody's going to know what this says. So I haven't written much more since then. But what I realized was, and we talked, a lot of couples don't do this, but we had talked about what would happen if either of us passed and the other one was left behind. Because we were married almost 47 years.
Wow.
And very, very happily. I loved him. Believe me, I loved him to death. But we both wanted each other to be happy. If you want to find a mate, go for it. If you want to do something in the world, go for it. We were behind each other. So when he passed, I knew that I wasn't just going to sit. And it took me a few months to even start grieving, to be honest with you. I was so busy with paperwork and filling out all the forms and all that stuff. It kept my mind busy. And a friend of mine who I had been on the board with the Kentucky United Nations Association, she said, you need to rejoin the board again. I said, well, I need to join the organization first. And so I did. And then she said, well, I'm going to propose to the president of the Kentucky division that you join the board again. So less than a month ago, they brought me back onto the board. And in the meantime, my friend Tina said, by the way, I'm going to New York to the UN in March, and it's the UN Women's Status on Women Commission. And I was like, I'm there, because I had previously worked on a Status on Women's program here in Louisville when I was a NABO president. And I was like, I'm in. So let's go to New York. So she goes, well, you can also apply to be a delegate, and that way you can actually go into the UN. And I was like, huh? Like, okay. So here's my thing. Because of all my international background and wanting to get back into it, because I love training people. I love doing cross-cultural training. I love helping people see different perspectives, different lifestyle, different culture. And we're all alike, we're all people, but we all have the very unique, very wonderful parts of us that are because of how we were brought up, the lives we led. And so I was like, well, how do I do this? She goes, oh, I'll send you a form. So I get the form and I had just a few days to fill it out. At 2:30 in the morning on January 2nd, I was filling this form in, thinking, oh, they're not going to go for me. Who knows? Guess what? I was chosen as one of the delegates to the United Nations. It's the United Nations Women's Status on Women Commission. I will be going to meetings in other parts of New York City and the UN in March. And it is a huge dream of mine because of my background, but also because of my love of cultures, of
Yeah.
people all over the world. I've lived and traveled, not all over the world, but many, many, many countries, including after high school, which I will tell you, when I was 17, and I'll show you a picture. Here's a picture of me.
Oh, I love that. I love
I
that.
was 17. It was my very first passport. And I went on a comparative political study to the Soviet Union for 3 weeks, to East Berlin. This was still behind the Iron Curtain. And we went to East Berlin, West Berlin, Warsaw, Poland, Finland, London, Sweden, Denmark, and we ended up in Paris, leaving from Paris. It was a 6-week trip.
Golly.
3 weeks in Russia, sorry, Soviet Union. And it changed my life because it opened up my eyes to very difficult, dangerous political lifestyles. It was very oppressive being in the Soviet Union. It was a gorgeous country, but we were traveling to go to one of the palaces out in the country. And I looked up from our bus, and in the corner of, I could see right there was like a pole and a little glass case, and we had machine guns pointed at us as we're driving out to and it wasn't just for us, it was for everybody
Right.
traveling. And that just gave me the willies. I was 17 years old. So it really did change my life. And it was even more oppressive in East Berlin. So we
Well,
had to go under the wall to get to West Berlin.
you're not 17 anymore. You've been through a lifetime of changes, a lifetime of sacrifice. And I am looking at a resilient survivor, thriver, and I'm witnessing it. Right? It's one thing to hear people say, "Oh, I survived." But you are thriving in your own determination to just go.
You know, Sandy, I had 6 miscarriages. And every time I went through them, it was a traumatic experience. But every time I went through them, I became stronger and stronger and more resilient. And I also had some major surgeries in my life. I had my gallbladder taken out when I was in my 30s. And so I've got this big railroad scar across the front of me. And I've been through a lot. A lot of people have gone through probably much more than me. But I want everyone to know you can thrive, but you can also enjoy life. I was listening to something on the radio today, and it was saying, oh, as you get older, you lose the thrill of life. I'm like, I'm not losing my thrill.
Mm-mm. No, in
I'm
fact,
not losing it.
Deborah, this morning I said, "Well, we're no spring chickens," and she said, "Oh, I am." I'm like, "Okay, okay, then spring chickens we are." And you are a witness to your life is your choice to create. If you stop creating, you'll stop having what you want, but you are literally having dreams come true right now.
You know, the fact that all of this came together in just a few weeks, literally, is still mind-blowing to me because I'm not gonna, tell people I'm not grieving because I do. I talk to my husband at night, I cry. I cry at movies. I cry when I see people kissing, hugging. I miss that. I'm 70 years old and I miss that warmth, that love, that partnership, that sharing of ideas. I miss that so much. But I also know that I can get a lot from being connected to the women friends that I have. And it's because of all my friends and my family and my son. I could not be going through all this without my son. He's been with me the whole time with my husband. He's my rock. He's 44 and I love him to death. And I know I wouldn't have made it through the caregiving years if Michael had not been there for me. And a lot of mothers can't say that because it's usually, the women that come in. My son took the place of a daughter in that way. He was amazing. He still is. He's still helping me go through stuff.
My daughter helped me when my husband passed away, and I wouldn't have made it without her. So here we are. It's March is coming up.
I know.
You're going to the UN as a delegate.
And for women and girls, for women and girls. This is my bottom line is we as women, we have to support programs and fight for programs that help us. And for the future of women and girls' health, justice, and let's talk about it, sexual violence.
Well, you couldn't have picked a better day than Martin Luther King Day
I know.
to be on this podcast, and it'll air, I think, next week. But we can
Okay.
celebrate then the fact that women and girls need the world support, and
It's
you'll be there,
especially right now. I mean, let's be real, especially right now.
especially right
We
now.
are regressing rather than progressing, and it's overwhelming. Even just, I'm sorry I'm going to say this, but I'm going to be real because I'm an open book. But I watch these commercials for the ED meds,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
for men.
Uh-huh.
And I look at those and they spend all this money and all this time. And I'm thinking, what about the women who are actually carrying the children? Where's the health care for them? Where's the health care for women who, like me, miscarried? I didn't cause my miscarriages. They happened naturally. I was lucky. I lived through them.
Yeah.
I didn't die. I'm lucky. I'm very lucky. But the bottom line is, why do men get good health care and we don't? Hello?
Well, I have a girlfriend, and she has an organization called EBW, Empowering a Billion Women, and she's spoken to the UN. And actually, I have a book about Lumi the lightning bug, which I'm sure you don't know anything about because I never talk about it. But
No.
I asked her to take it to the UN that it could be shared on an app for girls worldwide. It's a beautiful book about be light, be bright, be you. You're not the others, they're not you, and you'll do things the others don't do. But here's the thing, um,
Can
justice
you send
and
me a link to that? Because when I go, I don't know if she'll be there or not, but I will share it because I'll be in a lot of different committees
yeah,
and I would love to share that. But also to let people know the book that I wrote was not like it was about caregiving, but it was about the very difficult journey that we were on at the time. He'd been diagnosed 20 years when
let's
I
see it.
finished it.
Hold it up. The unexpected detour. There you go. Becoming a Parkinson's expert
Becoming a Parkinson's expert and patient advocate the
the
hard
hard
way,
way.
which is what I did. But on the back, there's a picture of me doing my jewelry.
Oh,
You know why I chose that picture? I want to encourage caregivers to give themselves permission to enjoy life, even if they're caregiving long term.
uh, well, I know we could go on for 2 more hours because I've got questions I want to ask. But I want to just say thank you for sharing not only your journey and your detour, but being a witness that Amazing things are still ahead of you, step by step, in ways you could never imagine. And you have to be a yes to going forward.
I want to encourage all women to do that. And it's not always easy because we get caught up with childbearing and raising our kids and then watching them go to college. And then we're like, now what? So find something that you enjoy. And I like people to think of this. Find the joy that you had when you were a kid, because that's what I did with my jewelry. Designing jewelry and working with the pearls and the gemstones and the silver, that was like being a child. Try to find that joy in your life, because you got to find joy in your life. It's a hard enough life to live. If you can't find that joy, you get lost.
Well, and I stand for women having each other. And what I say is you can't be your best self by yourself. Hook up with a group of women that support you, empower you, celebrate with you, which of course we have in common, which is how we know each other. So, Katherine,
Yes.
thank
Yes.
you so much for being with
You're
me today.
welcome. And hug everybody, because hugging is important.
It is important. Mwah. Bless you, Miss Katherine.
Thank you. It was fun. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to Pink Lady Posse Podcast, where women go from what now to what's next. Come join us at pinkladyposse.com, where we share community, resources, and tools to support your next beautiful chapter. With love, light, and a little lipstick. See you next time.